My parents kicked me out for being a PR risk, then learned I controlled a real estate deal they desperately needed. The message, brief and dismissive, shimmered on Alara's antique mahogany desk, its polished surface reflecting the soft glow of the screen. It was not merely a digital insult but a stark reminder of a world she barely recognized, a world of fleeting connections and curated images. Her study, a sanctuary of aged leather, rich mahogany, and silent wisdom, usually offered solace. Today, it felt infiltrated by the shrill, saccharine condescension of Serafina, her daughter-in-law. Serafina, whose very existence seemed an artifice, a meticulously curated tapestry woven from public appearances and manufactured prestige. Mother Alara, the message began, the words dripping with a faux sweetness that made Alara's stomach clench, a familiar visceral reaction to Serafina's veiled barbs. Kaylin and I are thrilled to be hosting the Starlight Charity Gala next month. It's an absolutely crucial event for our social standing, and for Kaylin's latest venture, you understand. We've had to be incredibly selective with the guest list to maintain the desired aesthetic. And well, your presence, while appreciated in spirit, might unfortunately be seen as a bit of a PR risk. Your traditional style, darling, just doesn't quite align with the modern, avant-garde vibe we're cultivating. We hope you understand. Perhaps you could send a generous donation instead. We'd be ever so grateful. Alara, a woman of 78 years, whose silver hair was always impeccably styled in a classic chignon, and whose eyes held the quiet wisdom of decades, felt a familiar pang of hurt. It was sharper this time, piercing through the carefully constructed layers of her composure. She reread the message, her gaze lingering on PR risk and traditional style. It wasn't merely an exclusion from an event, it was a public declaration of her obsolescence, a cold, calculated dismissal of her very being. The words echoed a sentiment she had long sensed, a subtle yet pervasive devaluation of her presence in their lives. For years, she had been the silent, invisible pillar supporting their ostentatious lives, a boundless reservoir of wealth and unwavering support. A quiet hope had always flickered within her, that one day, her children and grandchildren would see her as more than just a means to an end, that they would recognize the heart behind the purse strings. This message, however, was not just the final straw, it was the entire bale, setting fire to the bridge of her enduring hope, illuminating the barren landscape of their ingratitude. She laid her spectacles on the desk, her movements slow, deliberate, each gesture imbued with a newfound gravitas. A profound stillness settled over her, deeper than the usual quiet of her grand, ancestral home. It wasn't the searing heat of anger that consumed her, not yet. It was a glacial calm, an icy clarity that washed away the lingering warmth of sentimentality, of obligation, of the desperate yearning for affection. The silence in her opulent, yet often empty, home resonated not with loneliness, but with the weighty finality of a decision made, a line irrevocably drawn. Meanwhile, miles away in their sprawling, modern mansion, a mansion Alara had quietly paid the down payment for, and countless renovations over the years, Kaylin, Alara's only son, was clinking champagne flutes with Serafina. Kaylin, a man perpetually teetering on the edge of financial disaster despite his mother's constant interventions, had not even bothered to read the message. He had merely glanced at the sender, then dismissed it with a wave of his hand, relying on his wife to handle such delicate family matters. "She'll understand, darling," he'd said, a dismissive flick of his wrist accompanying the words, the bubbles of champagne mirroring the effervescence of his self-delusion. "Mother's always been so, understanding. A little hurt, perhaps, but she'll send the check, as always. She always does." Serafina had merely smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes, a silent agreement that Alara was a resource to be tapped, a problem to be managed. "Of course, she will, Kaylin. She knows her place." They had toasted to their future, to their social triumph, entirely oblivious. Utterly and completely. They had just ignited a fuse, one that would not only bring down their carefully constructed world but would also liberate a matriarch who had finally decided to reclaim her power. The woman they had deemed a PR risk was about to become their greatest liability, and they had no idea she held the keys to their entire future in her quiet, discerning hands. The game, for Elara, had changed. And she was about to play. To understand the full weight of that single, dismissive message, one had to delve into the labyrinthine history of Elara's quiet sacrifices, a chronicle of unrequited generosity. Her late husband, Arthur Thorne, had been a visionary, a pioneer in the nascent tech industry decades ago, whose early investments had blossomed into an immense, diversified fortune. He had been a man of quiet brilliance, deeply devoted to Elara, and their life together had been one of shared dreams and mutual respect. Upon his passing 25 years prior, Elara had inherited not just his immense wealth but also his formidable business acumen, though she chose to wield it silently, from the shadows. She had become the unseen financial engine, the boundless ATM for her beloved son, Kalen, and his ambitious, image-obsessed wife, Serafina. Her hope, born from a deep well of maternal love, was always simple: genuine love, respect, and a place at the family table, not just as the provider, but as a cherished member, a matriarch whose wisdom was sought, not dismissed. From the moment Arthur passed, Elara had dedicated herself to ensuring her family's prosperity and happiness. She had truly believed that financial security would foster familial bonds, creating a foundation upon which love and connection could flourish. It was a belief that had been cruelly tested, time and again, each test eroding a piece of her spirit, yet never quite breaking her resolve. Kalen, always more interested in the facade of success than its reality, had embarked on a dizzying series of ill-fated business ventures, each one draining more from Elara's coffers than the last. She remembered the early days, Kalen's youthful enthusiasm, a flicker of hope that he might truly build something. But the hope had always been fleeting. There was the eco-friendly, tech startup that produced overpriced, unnecessary gadgets, a venture Elara had initially believed in, quietly funding its seed stage. It soon became a black hole, costing Elara nearly $10 million in seed funding and subsequent bailouts, each check written with a tightening in her chest, a silent prayer that this time, he would learn. Then came the avant-garde art gallery in a prime city location, a blatant vanity project designed more for Serafina's social climbing than for genuine artistic merit. It bled money for 3 years until Elara had to secretly buy out its spiraling debts to save Kalen from public humiliation, a sum exceeding $7 million, a sum she had seen vanish into thin air, leaving no tangible success in its wake. Most recently, Kalen had plunged into a boutique hotel chain idea, promising unprecedented returns, yet it was already teetering on the brink, relying solely on Elara's quarterly injections of at least $2 million just to keep its operations afloat, to pay the salaries of staff who produced little and to keep up appearances. Each time, Elara had quietly, without fanfare, written the checks, arranged the transfers, and bought the distressed assets, hoping Kalen would learn, would succeed, and most importantly, would appreciate her silent efforts. But appreciation was a currency Kalen rarely dealt in. He saw it as his birthright, a continuous flow from an inexhaustible source, a mother's endless well of resources. Serafina's demands were equally voracious, though perhaps more outwardly visible, more focused on the immediate gratification of public display. Her life was an endless pursuit of social validation, a relentless climb up a ladder of perceived prestige. Elara had, over the years, funded Serafina's designer wardrobe, a seemingly bottomless pit of haute couture from Parisian runways to Milanese boutiques. The annual bills, meticulously detailed by Elara's financial team, easily totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. There were the luxury vacations, private jets to the Maldives, chalets in Aspen, yachts in the Mediterranean, all meticulously documented on social media, each lavish expense a silent echo of Elara's generosity, yet never acknowledged. Serafina's memberships to exclusive country clubs, elite fitness studios, and prestigious charity boards, costing a combined $50,000 a year, were also on Elara's tab. Every time Serafina needed to impress someone, to secure a new social alliance, or needed a refresh to her public image, Elara's accounts would be discreetly tapped, a quiet withdrawal from her seemingly infinite reserve. Elara recalled the time Serafina had insisted on a last-minute trip to Paris for a single fashion show, deeming it absolutely essential for her social visibility. The private jet, the suite at the Ritz, the front-row tickets, all paid by Elara, a silent gesture of support that was met with a perfunctory text message of thanks, immediately followed by photos of Serafina air-kissing socialites on Instagram. The grandchildren, young Arthur and Lyra, though deeply loved by Elara, had also grown up in this gilded cage of entitlement. Their education was exclusively top-tier, a reflection of their parents' desire for status, not necessarily genuine academic rigor. Young Arthur, named after Elara's late husband, attended a renowned boarding school in Switzerland, his annual tuition and living expenses amounting to over $150,000. His sister, Lyra, preferred a prestigious art academy in London, a similarly hefty bill Elara covered without question, despite her quiet reservations about Lyra's true commitment to her studies. When Arthur needed a new sports car for his 18th birthday, Elara, ever wanting to please, had purchased him a sleek Porsche 911 Carrera outright, a gift that was accepted with a perfunctory thank you and an immediate request for a customization budget. Lyra, upon graduating, received a fully furnished apartment in London, its initial down payment and subsequent monthly maintenance also falling to Elara, a total investment of over $1.50 million. Elara had envisioned cozy visits, shared cups of tea in Lyra's London flat, but her invitations were always met with excuses of busy schedules. Beyond the extravagant purchases, Elara bore the weight of their everyday lives, the mundane yet colossal expenses that allowed them to maintain their opulent facade. She covered the mortgages on Kaylin and Serafina's two primary residences, the sprawling Hamptons Retreat, $5 million mortgage **, and their primary city penthouse, $8 million mortgage **. Property taxes, utility bills, the salaries of their domestic staff, nannies, chefs, housekeepers, drivers, all quietly settled by Elara's accounts. Even their luxury vehicles, a fleet of high-end cars including a Bentley Continental GT for Kaylin, a Rolls-Royce Ghost for Serafina, and a fleet of Range Rovers for their daily use, were either purchased outright or leased through companies discreetly funded by Elara's trusts. The total value of these vehicles exceeded $1.5 million. Elara had always hoped that her financial comfort would translate into emotional closeness, but instead, it seemed to create a chasm of expectation and entitlement. The disrespect was a slow, insidious erosion, like water wearing away stone. Elara was always invited to family events as an afterthought, if at all. Her opinions on investments, on life, on anything, were met with polite nods and immediate disregard. "Mother, you wouldn't understand the modern market," Kaylin would say, dismissing her decades of quiet financial management, her inherent understanding of the ebb and flow of wealth. "Mother, your fashion sense is just so quaint," Serafina would coo, implying Elara was an embarrassing relic, a stain on their polished image. They feared her old-fashioned presence would tarnish their carefully constructed facade, the very facade built entirely on Elara's silent fortune. Elara remembered the time she had offered to host Christmas at her own grand estate, a cherished tradition from Arthur's time, hoping for a warm, intimate family gathering. Kaylin and Serafina had scoffed, claiming her home was too quiet and not Instagrammable enough. They had opted for a lavish resort in the Caribbean, sending Elara a picture of their smiling faces on a white sand beach, a trip she, of course, had paid for. The sting of exclusion, of being viewed purely as a resource, had hardened her resolve, each incident adding another layer of ice to her heart. Each instance of her financial assistance was met not with gratitude, but with an expectation, a sense of entitlement that grew with every passing year. She had yearned for genuine connection, for a shared laugh, a heartfelt conversation, for the simple warmth of familial love. Instead, she received only requests for money, thinly veiled criticisms, and the cold shoulder of polite dismissal. The gala exclusion was not an isolated incident, it was the culmination of decades of such treatment, a final, unvarnished statement of their true feelings, a declaration of her expendability. The morning after receiving Serafina's venomous message, Elara rose with a quiet purpose that had been absent for far too long. The usual faint ache of disappointment, a familiar companion for years, was replaced by a steely resolve, cold and sharp. She dressed with meticulous care, choosing a deep sapphire blue suit that had always made her feel powerful, a subtle nod to the woman she was rediscovering, the woman Arthur had known. Her breakfast, usually a solitary affair, felt different, the coffee tasted clearer, the fruit brighter, as if the world itself had shed a layer of hazy disillusionment. She felt a lightness, a profound liberation she hadn't known was possible. At precisely 9 o'clock, she picked up the phone. Her first call was to Mr. Davies, her long-standing attorney, a man as discreet and sharp as she was, whose quiet competence had guided the Thorne family trusts for decades. His voice, usually formal and measured, betrayed a hint of surprise at the unusual urgency, yet utter calm, in Elara's tone. "Mr. Davies," she began, her voice calm, utterly devoid of emotion, each word carefully chosen, "I require your immediate assistance with a matter concerning my financial arrangements with my son, Caelan Thorne, and his wife, Serafina." She then laid out her instructions with precise clarity, a strategy she had carefully formulated in the quiet hours of the night. "Effective immediately, I want all existing financial allowances to Caelan and Serafina Thorne, and their children, halted. This includes all direct transfers, all payments for their credit cards, all mortgage payments, utility bills, staff salaries, and any other standing orders from my accounts on their behalf." Mr. Davies, a seasoned lawyer who had witnessed many family dramas, simply listened, a hum of understanding resonating from his end of the line. He knew Elara well enough to recognize the weight behind her composed words, the finality of her decision. He sensed the unspoken history that had led to this moment. "Consider it done, Mrs. Thorne," he affirmed, his voice respectful. "I will draft the necessary legal documents and send them for your signature within the hour. Discretion, as always, will be paramount." Next, she called Ms. Anya Sharma, her asset manager, a brilliant young woman whom Elara had personally mentored, who oversaw the complex web of trusts and investments Arthur Thorne had left behind. Anya was intimately familiar with the intricacies of Caelan's struggling empire, having discreetly managed the constant flow of funds from Elara to his failing ventures. "Ms. Sharma," Elara stated, her voice unwavering, "I need you to put the acquisition of the multi-million-dollar property on Elmwood Avenue, which Caelan's company is currently pursuing, on indefinite hold. No further steps are to be taken. Do not release any funds, do not sign any agreements, and communicate to all involved parties that the deal is on ice, indefinitely." Anya understood the devastating implications of such a move. This particular real estate deal was the lifeline Caelan's company desperately needed. Without it, his entire business model would collapse, unable to secure the necessary collateral and investment for his failing hotel chain. Anya confirmed, her voice reflecting a newfound respect for Elara's decisive action, a silent admiration for her strength. "Consider it done, Mrs. Thorne. I'll ensure all legal and financial protocols are followed immediately. I'll also make sure I'm unavailable for any personal inquiries." For the next few hours, Elara meticulously reviewed documents, signed the necessary legal forms that Mr. Davies's office swiftly prepared, and confirmed the cessation of payments with Ms. Sharma. Each signature felt like a release, a loosening of the invisible chains that had bound her for decades, a breaking free from a self-imposed financial servitude. There was no theatricality in her actions, no malice, just a profound sense of rightness, of belated justice. She felt a quiet strength radiating through her, a clarity of purpose that had been obscured for far too long. The first ripple of panic struck Caelan Thorne that very afternoon. He was at a high-end Mayfair boutique, attempting to purchase a rare vintage watch he believed would impress a potential investor for his hotel chain, another superficial display of wealth. As the sales assistant slid his black card into the machine, the transaction was met with a jarring, declined notification. Kalen frowned, annoyed, his carefully cultivated nonchalance momentarily faltering. There must be a mistake, he muttered, affecting an air of superiority. Try it again. It's my mother's account, it's always cleared. The assistant tried again, with the same unyielding result. Kalen, exasperated, called his bank, only to be informed that the supplementary card linked to his mother's account had been temporarily suspended. He shrugged it off as a clerical error, perhaps his mother had forgotten to inform him of a new security measure, or perhaps it was her aging mind. Typical, he thought, mother's getting old, probably a bit forgetful. The true significance of the event barely registered beyond a minor inconvenience. Serafina's shock came a few hours later, a more direct hit to her carefully constructed world. She was tracking an order for a bespoke designer gown, a crucial piece for the very Starlight Gala she had excluded Alara from. An email popped up, order cancellation notification. The reason cited was a failed payment. Serafina immediately called the boutique, her voice rising in indignation, a shrill note of panic seeping into her carefully modulated tones. They informed her that the credit card on file, an account specifically managed by Alara's financial team, had been deactivated. Serafina's elegant brow furrowed, a crease of genuine distress marring her perfect visage. This is absurd. My mother-in-law handles all our finances. There must be a system glitch. She tried to call Alara, but the matriarch's phone went straight to voicemail, a serene, pre-recorded message offering no answers, only a frustrating silence. Serafina felt a tremor of unease, a flicker of doubt about Alara's supposed forgetfulness. The minor annoyances escalated into genuine alarm by the end of the week. The monthly tuition bill for young Arthur's elite Swiss boarding school, typically paid directly by Alara's trust, bounced. The school's bursar's office, polite yet firm, informed Kalen that payment was overdue and immediate action was required. Kalen, furious, called Alara's direct line, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails, his voice growing hoarse with a mixture of rage and burgeoning fear. Mother, what is going on? The school is calling. Are you trying to embarrass me? This is utterly unacceptable. My son is being kicked out. Then came the true hammer blow, the one that shattered their complacent world. Kalen's lead investor for the Elmwood Avenue property deal called him, his voice laced with cold fury, a stark contrast to his usual amiable tone. Kalen, what in the blazes is happening with the Thorn Trust? Your asset manager, Amish Sharma, informed my team that the Elmwood deal is on indefinite hold. Indefinite. This is jeopardizing the entire syndicate. We had an agreement. This is highly unprofessional, Kalen, and frankly, unacceptable. Kalen stammered, completely blindsided, his mind reeling. On hold? No, that's impossible. My mother, she wouldn't, there must be a misunderstanding. Anya wouldn't do this. He tried to call Anya Sharma, but her assistant informed him she was unavailable, busy on an extended leave. He frantically called Mr. Davies, only to be met with similar evasiveness, a polite but impenetrable wall of professional silence. The realization slowly dawned on him, a chilling premonition that seeped into his bones. His mother, the quiet, compliant ATM, was not simply forgetting to pay bills. She was deliberately cutting off the oxygen supply. The fear was a cold, sharp blade, twisting in his gut, a fear he had never known. This was no glitch. This was a war. And he knew, with a dawning horror, who had declared it. The following Monday morning, a sleek black luxury sedan, a leased vehicle soon to be repossessed, screeched to a halt in front of Alara's elegant, old-money estate. Kalen and Serafina burst from the car, their faces contorted with a mixture of panic, rage, and bewildered betrayal. Kalen's usually immaculate hair was disheveled, strands falling across his sweat-beaded forehead. Serafina's designer scarf, once a symbol of her effortless elegance, was askew, her makeup slightly smeared, signs of their uncharacteristic disarray. They had tried everything over the weekend, incessant phone calls that went straight to voicemail, desperate emails that remained unanswered, even sending their grandchildren to Alara's gate with tearful pleas, hoping her maternal instincts would override her newfound resolve. All were met with serene silence from the matriarch, a silence that felt increasingly menacing. Now, cornered by mounting debts, impending foreclosures, and the catastrophic collapse of the Elmwood deal, they had no choice but to confront her directly. The front door, usually guarded by a polite but firm house manager, was unexpectedly ajar, an unsettling invitation. They stormed inside, their footsteps echoing loudly through the grand foyer, their hurried breaths sounding ragged in the quiet space. They found Alara in the drawing room, bathed in the soft morning light, seated by the fire, calmly sipping her morning tea, a leather-bound book resting in her lap. She looked utterly composed, her silver hair gleaming in a perfect chignon, her posture regal and unyielding. Her tranquility, a stark contrast to their inner turmoil, infuriated them further, fueling their desperate rage. "Mother!" Kalen's voice was a raw, guttural roar, startling the quiet room, reverberating through the high ceilings. "What in God's name are you doing?" Serafina, ever the dramatic one, rushed forward, tears already welling in her eyes, though none quite reached her carefully applied mascara. Her voice was a desperate wail. "Mother Alara, how could you? We are ruined. Absolutely ruined. Our accounts are frozen, the children's school fees are unpaid, Kalen's deal, it's a disaster. You've destroyed us." She extended a trembling hand, as if to plead for sympathy, for a return to the compliant, generous Alara she had always known. Alara slowly lowered her teacup to its saucer, the delicate clink sounding unnervingly loud, a tiny, precise sound in the tense silence. She looked at them, her gaze clear, unblinking, devoid of the usual undercurrent of hurt that had softened her eyes for decades. There was no pain, no sorrow, only a profound, cold assessment. "Good morning, Kalen." "Serafina," she said, her voice soft, yet chillingly firm, each word enunciated with a new, quiet authority. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." They didn't sit. Kalen paced frantically, running a hand through his disheveled hair, his face contorted. "Discuss? There's nothing to discuss. You've cut us off. You're sabotaging my business. Do you know what this means? Bankruptcy. Public humiliation. Everything I've worked for, everything you supposedly helped me build, is collapsing." He gestured wildly around the opulent room, as if demanding she acknowledge the magnitude of her perceived transgression. "Everything you worked for, Kalen." Alara's voice was still quiet, but a new, steel-like edge had entered it, sharp and precise. "Or everything I financed. Let us be clear. The eco-friendly, tech startup that cost me $10 million, a sum that could have funded dozens of legitimate ventures. The avant-garde art gallery that bled $7 million from my accounts, a monument to vanity rather than art. The boutique hotel chain that was already dead in the water, requiring $2 million from me every quarter just to pay salaries and keep up appearances. Was that your work, Kalen, or was it simply my money you squandered, my resources you consumed without a thought for the source?" Kalen froze, stunned into silence by the directness of her assault, the stark, brutal truth of her words. He stammered, searching for an excuse, "Those were investments, Mother. Risks. That's how business works. You don't understand modern finance. Risks you never bore, Kalen," Alara countered, her eyes piercing him, seeing through his flimsy excuses. "Because I was always there, silently, to absorb the failures, to cushion your falls. To pay the mortgages on your Hamptons retreat and your city penthouse. To cover your property taxes, your utility bills, the salaries of your domestic staff, nannies, chefs, housekeepers, drivers. Do you recall the Bentley I bought you, Kalen? Or the Rolls-Royce for Serafina? The Porsche for Arthur? The apartment for Lyra? Do you remember the hundreds of thousands I spent annually on Serafina's designer wardrobe, her exclusive club memberships, her endless luxury vacations, each Instagram post a testament to my unacknowledged generosity. She paused, letting the litany of her generosity hang in the air, each item a silent indictment, a crushing weight of unacknowledged sacrifices. Do you remember any of these, Kaylin, Serafina, or did you simply see them as your due, an endless tap from an inexhaustible well? Serafina, momentarily stunned by Ilara's unprecedented tirade, found her voice, a high-pitched indignation. This is emotional blackmail, Mother Ilara. How dare you throw our lives in our faces like this? We are your family. Your only family. You're destroying us. Her carefully constructed facade began to crack, revealing the raw, desperate fear beneath. Destroying you. Ilara's lip curved into a faint, bitter smile, a ghost of the warmth it once held. Or forcing you to finally stand on your own 2 feet. For decades, I have poured my late husband's legacy, and my own quiet efforts, into your lives. Not because I was obliged, but because I hoped for genuine affection, for inclusion, for a shared laugh, for simply being seen as a mother, not a bank. And what did I receive in return? Her gaze hardened, fixing on Serafina, who visibly flinched. I received a message, barely a week ago, telling me I was a PR risk for your precious gala. That my traditional style didn't align with your modern aesthetic. A message dismissing me, humiliating me, after years of silent financial support for your every whim, for every carefully constructed facade you present to the world. A message that declared me obsolete, embarrassing, something to be hidden away. Serafina gasped, her face paling, the color draining from her cheeks. That was a misunderstanding, Mother Ilara. A silly email. You're overreacting, she stammered, desperately trying to reassert control, to revert to the old dynamics. Overreacting? Ilara chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that sent a shiver down their spines. Is it an overreaction to finally acknowledge that my love and my money have bought me nothing but condescension and exclusion? Is it an overreaction to realize that you view me purely as a financial resource, a quiet ATM that should remain unseen, unheard, and unquestioning? Her voice rose slightly, gaining momentum, becoming a force. Kaylin, seeing his world crumble, tried a new tactic, a last-ditch effort born of desperation, threats. You can't do this, Mother. My lawyers will be in touch. We'll tie this up in court for years. Your reputation will be ruined. Do you want the world to know you disinherited your own son, your grandchildren? The shame, Mother, the shame. Ilara's eyes, however, held no fear. They held only an unwavering resolve, a calm certainty. You may try, Kaylin. But everything I've given you over the years was either a gift, or an investment through carefully structured trusts that allow me full discretion. My attorney, Mr. Davies, has already ensured all the necessary paperwork is in order. And as for my reputation, I believe yours is far more precarious than mine, especially when word gets out that your entire business empire was built on your mother's charity, and is now collapsing because she decided to close her purse. Then came the true, devastating reveal, delivered with a quiet power that knocked the air from their lungs, a final, crushing blow. And let us speak of the Elmwood Avenue property deal, Kaylin. The one that is currently on indefinite hold, causing such distress to your investors, the linchpin of your entire failing business. Ilara leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet each word landed like a hammer blow, precise and devastating. What you conveniently forgot, Kaylin, is that the property you are desperately trying to acquire, the cornerstone of your supposed empire, is part of Arthur's original real estate portfolio. A portfolio managed directly by the Thorn Trust, of which I am the sole trustee, with absolute, undeniable control. Kaylin's jaw dropped, his face turning an ashen white. Serafina's eyes widened in horror, a primal fear finally replacing her superficial indignation. They had always assumed the property was owned by a distant, anonymous holding company, unaware of the labyrinthine financial structures Arthur Thorne had put in place, structures Elara had meticulously maintained, a silent guardian of their true wealth. Yes, Elara continued, observing their dawning realization with a chilling satisfaction, a quiet triumph. I control it. And I have instructed Ms. Sharma to put it on indefinite hold. Indefinite, Kaelan. Which means, your business, your reputation, your entire fragile world, rests entirely on my decision. And my decision, she said, her voice rising slightly, clear and resonant, a final, unyielding decree, is that you have had enough. More than enough. You will receive no more money from me. Not a single cent. You have proven yourselves incapable of appreciating genuine love, respect, or even common decency. You will now learn what it means to stand on your own feet. Kaelan collapsed into a nearby armchair, his face ashen, the color drained from him, his body trembling. Serafina let out a small, choked sob, her carefully constructed facade cracking completely, revealing the raw, desperate fear beneath. Elara simply watched them, her expression unyielding, her eyes holding the quiet satisfaction of a long-overdue reckoning. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Serafina's ragged breathing. There would be no more begging, no more manipulation, no more empty promises. Elara's resolve was absolute, her words a final, irrevocable decree. The matriarch had finally reclaimed her throne. Kaelan and Serafina left Elara's estate that day not in a huff, not with defiant words, but in a dazed, almost catatonic state. The elegant iron gates clanged shut behind them, a sound of definitive closure, sealing off not just the property but also their entire financial lifeline, the very air they breathed. The drive home was a haunting silence, punctuated only by Serafina's muffled sobs, her carefully applied mascara now streaming down her cheeks. The reality of their situation, cold and stark, began to sink in, a crushing weight they had never known. The immediate fallout was brutal and swift. Kaelan's company, already precariously balanced on a mountain of debt and empty promises, imploded within weeks. Without the Elmwood Avenue property deal, which had been the cornerstone of his new investment round and the collateral for his failing hotel chain, his investors pulled out en masse, their patience exhausted. Creditors swarmed, suppliers demanded immediate payment for long overdue invoices, and the bank foreclosed on the meager assets he did genuinely own. The boutique hotel chain, his supposed magnum opus, a symbol of his grand aspirations, filed for bankruptcy, leading to massive layoffs and a public scandal that painted Kaelan as an incompetent, privileged fraud, a charlatan who built his empire on his mother's money. His name, once whispered with a degree of manufactured respect in exclusive circles, became synonymous with failure, a cautionary tale. Serafina's carefully curated social standing crumbled with equal speed, perhaps even more painfully for her. The elite social circles she had painstakingly cultivated were, above all, defined by wealth and appearances. The gossip mill churned relentlessly, fueled by the swift collapse of Kaelan's business and whispers of their financial ruin, of their long-standing reliance on Elara's boundless generosity, and of their subsequent public humiliation. Invitations to exclusive galas, including the very Starlight Charity Gala that had sparked Elara's wrath, ceased arriving. Friends, once eager to bask in their reflected light and enjoy their lavish hospitality, subtly distanced themselves, their smiles polite but their eyes cold. Serafina, who lived for public image and validation, found herself ostracized, her name now a cautionary tale among the very social climbers she had once disdained. She had lost her audience, and with it, her entire sense of self, her carefully constructed identity. The luxury cars, the gleaming symbols of their inherited wealth and extravagant lifestyle, were the first tangible losses. The Bentley, the Rolls-Royce, the Range Rovers, all either repossessed by the banks or quickly sold for a fraction of their value to cover pressing debts, each sale a public admission of their downfall. Their sprawling Hamptons retreat, a place of lavish summer parties and ostentatious displays, was next. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings, and the auction date was swiftly set, its sale notice plastered for all to see. The city penthouse, once their pride and joy, a testament to their urban sophistication, was put on the market, though finding a buyer willing to pay the inflated price in the current climate proved challenging. The emptiness of their once vibrant, bustling home became a stark mirror of their hollowed-out lives. The grandchildren, Arthur and Lyra, though initially bewildered, were the most visibly affected and, perhaps, the most impacted in the long run. Arthur was forced to leave his elite Swiss boarding school mid-semester, his tuition unpaid, a sudden, brutal shock. He returned home bewildered and deeply resentful, his dreams of a carefree, privileged future shattered, replaced by an unfamiliar anxiety. Lyra's apartment in London, once her sanctuary of artistic freedom, was reclaimed, forcing her to move back to the rapidly shrinking family home, her artistic aspirations put on hold as she grappled with the new reality of financial constraint and a future she hadn't anticipated. Their complaints, once directed at Elara for being unfair, slowly morphed into a grudging understanding, a dawning realization as they witnessed their parents' desperate scramble, their endless arguments, and the slow unraveling of their comfortable lives. Internal strife became the norm in Caelan and Seraphina's household. Accusations flew like poison darts, bitter recriminations echoing through the increasingly empty rooms of their mansion. Caelan blamed Seraphina for her extravagant spending, for pushing him into risky ventures, for the infamous PR risk message that had triggered Elara's wrath. Seraphina blamed Caelan for his business failures, for his inherent incompetence, for his inability to secure their financial future, for being unable to handle his own mother. Their marriage, once a facade of convenience and shared ambition, a partnership based on mutual gain, began to fray under the relentless pressure of their new, harsh reality, revealing the brittle foundation it was built upon. While their world imploded, Elara's, paradoxically, began to expand. The weight she had carried for decades, the silent burden of their ingratitude, lifted like a heavy shroud. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a quiet joy she hadn't known since Arthur's passing. The silence in her home was no longer lonely, it was serene, a canvas upon which she could paint a new life, a future designed purely by her own desires. Her first act was simple, yet deeply symbolic. She called Margaret, an old friend from university whom she had slowly lost touch with, always prioritizing her family's demands over her own needs. Margaret, Elara said, a genuine warmth in her voice that Margaret hadn't heard in years, a lightness that was unmistakable, would you care to join me for lunch next Tuesday? There's a wonderful little bistro I've heard about, rather charming. Margaret, surprised but delighted, readily agreed. The lunch, filled with laughter and shared memories, of forgotten dreams and rekindled spirits, was the first of many. Elara began to reclaim her own social life, one genuine connection at a time. Next, Elara fulfilled a lifelong dream she had always postponed, always placing her family's needs before her own aspirations. She booked a 2-month grand tour of the Mediterranean, a leisurely cruise interspersed with extended stays in historic cities she had only read about in her quiet study. She hired a private guide, arranged for specialized art history lectures, and packed her bags with a lightness of spirit she hadn't felt in decades. Before she left, she reconnected with an old passion, painting. She set up an easel in her sunlit studio, untouched for years, and began to paint vibrant landscapes, each brushstroke a testament to her newfound freedom, each color a reflection of her blossoming spirit. The colors were bolder, the strokes more confident, more expressive than anything she had painted before. She was no longer just the silent financial engine, she was a woman rediscovering herself, her creativity, her very essence. Months passed, and the seasons turned, each bringing a renewed sense of purpose and joy to Elara's life. Her Mediterranean tour had been transformative, a journey of self-discovery as much as a tour of ancient lands. She had walked through ancient ruins, marveling at the endurance of history. She had stood before masterpieces of Renaissance art, feeling a connection to the artists across centuries. She had dined with fascinating strangers who knew nothing of her past burdens, and simply existed as herself, unburdened by expectations or demands. She returned home rejuvenated, her eyes sparkling with a renewed zest for life, her spirit lighter than it had ever been. She began to spend her immense wealth differently, with a profound sense of intention and impact. Instead of propping up failing ventures and fueling lavish, ungrateful lifestyles, Elara directed her resources towards causes she deeply cared about, towards creating lasting, positive change. She established a substantial foundation dedicated to supporting young female entrepreneurs, recognizing the immense potential in those who genuinely sought to build something from the ground up, unlike her son. She endowed scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing the arts, remembering Lyra's talent but also the privilege that had cushioned her, ensuring that talent found its path regardless of background. She became a patron of local historical preservation societies, ensuring that beauty and heritage would endure for future generations, unlike the fleeting facades Kaylin and Serafina had chased. She traveled frequently, explored new hobbies like classical music appreciation and gourmet cooking classes, immersing herself in experiences that enriched her soul. She cultivated a rich social circle of genuine friends who valued her for her intellect, her kindness, and her wisdom, not her bank balance. Her home, once a lonely monument to her generosity, now hummed with a quiet joy, filled with the presence of friends, the strains of classical music, and the comforting scent of freshly baked bread. Elara, truly, was living. She found immense satisfaction in using her wealth to create lasting, positive impact, rather than fueling a cycle of ungrateful consumption. The constant anxiety she had carried for decades had vanished, replaced by a profound sense of inner peace and fulfillment. As for Kaylin and Serafina, their path was far more arduous, a steep climb from the depths of their self-inflicted ruin. The Hamptons retreat was foreclosed upon and sold at auction, a final, public humiliation. The city penthouse eventually sold for significantly less than they had hoped, barely covering their remaining debts, leaving them with little. Kaylin, stripped of his inherited privilege and corporate facade, was forced to confront reality, a reality he had always avoided. He found a job in a mid-level management position at a small, reputable firm, a stark contrast to his former life of self-proclaimed entrepreneurship and grand, failing ventures. He worked long hours, learned the value of a steady paycheck, and for the first time in his adult life, truly understood the meaning of earning his own living. The humility was a bitter lesson, but a necessary one. Serafina, devastated by her fall from grace, initially struggled the most. Without the constant flow of funds, her designer wardrobe became a poignant reminder of a lost era, a collection of ghost memories. She tried to maintain her social standing, attending events with borrowed clothes, but the doors that were once open to her were now firmly shut, her former friends actively avoiding her. Eventually, she began to adapt, albeit slowly and painfully, forced by necessity. She started a small online business selling curated vintage clothing, using her innate sense of style for genuine commerce rather than mere consumption. She learned to manage a budget, to cook, to live without domestic staff, to rely on her own efforts. The forced humility was a bitter pill, but it slowly, subtly, began to chip away at her deep-seated superficiality, revealing a nascent resilience. Arthur and Lyra, forced to mature rapidly, found their own paths, forging identities independent of their parents' expectations. Arthur, after a period of sullen resentment and confusion, enrolled in a public university, working part-time to cover his expenses, a concept entirely new to him. He discovered a passion for environmental science, a field far removed from his father's speculative ventures, finding purpose in something tangible and impactful. Lyra, while still missing her London apartment and the lifestyle it afforded, immersed herself in the local art scene, taking on commissions and teaching art classes to children, finding joy in creation rather than consumption. They were, perhaps for the first time, learning the value of hard work, resilience, and self-reliance, lessons that would serve them far better than inherited wealth. Their relationship with their grandmother remained distant, the bridge of trust still broken by years of neglect, but the desperate, entitled demands had ceased. A faint, distant respect had begun to form. The story of Elara Thorne, the silent matriarch who reclaimed her power, became a quiet legend among her closest confidants. It served as a profound testament to an enduring truth, that love, true affection, and genuine respect can never be bought with money. While financial generosity can provide opportunities, it cannot substitute for character, nor can it purchase the warmth of genuine human connection. The deepest well of wealth lies not in inherited fortunes, but in one's own self-worth, one's unwavering dignity, and the courage to set boundaries, even with those you once loved unconditionally. Ultimately, Elara learned that the greatest act of loyalty, and the most fulfilling investment, is the one made in oneself, fostering a life of purpose, peace, and authentic joy. She had finally freed herself, and in doing so, had inadvertently, and perhaps belatedly, taught her family the most valuable lesson of all. If Elara's story of resilience, and her long overdue journey to reclaim her own life, resonated with you, then this channel is here to bring you more powerful narratives of personal triumphs, life lessons, and moments where true character shines through. Make sure to subscribe to our channel right now and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. Perhaps Elara's journey also stirred reflections on your own experiences. Has there ever been a time when you faced profound ingratitude after giving so much of yourself? Or a moment when you had to make a tough decision to protect your own well-being, much like Elara did? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We read every single one, and your insights are truly invaluable. What thoughts would stir within you if you stood in Elara's shoes? Let us know.